This episode is about testing in college admissions. My guests, Ryan and Bill from Mindfish, are so smart and experienced, I bet they'll have a lot to say. I've told them that we'll focus the conversation on the test optional piece of the puzzle. To position the discussion, let me give a quick baseline here about testing. When we say testing, we're talking about the SAT and the ACT. These are different tests offered by different companies, but for college admissions, these are used interchangeably because colleges accept either without preference. That means the decision about which test to take rests with the student. I normally advise students who I work with to take each test once, either in a real setting or in a good practice setting, and then seeing which one they're better at by comparing the scores on a concordance table. I suggest that whichever one they're better at, they should focus only on that one. And they should take that test at least twice. Taking it twice lets you superscore, meaning using your best scores from each section. So that's the advice of take the test and decide later whether you'll submit it. I like that approach, and I bet that's what the Mindfish guys will say as well. The approach works if you think you can get a score that you're happy with. Some students think that this approach might not work though. They think that it's a waste of time or perhaps even torture. They may truly know that they won't get a score that they would be proud of or that they could use for college admissions. Or they may have debilitating test anxiety, or they may simply not have the available time or energy to get their score up to a place that they'd be happy with. In those somewhat rare cases, I truly do think it's okay to turn your back on the test and just plan from the beginning that you won't submit a test score as part of your application. But for almost everyone, the decision is more nuanced, and it begins by taking the test and having a score to evaluate. When we come back, we'll dig into the test optional piece with Ryan and Bill. Stick around.
It's the College Talk Show. Today's theme, testing in a test optional world. With special guests, Bill Huston and Ryan Krug. And now, here's your host, Chris Bell.
Welcome back. I am so happy to have our guests here. Bill Huston and Ryan Krug are co-founders of Mindfish right here in Colorado. They know the testing world inside and out, and they're here to help us break it all down. Welcome, Bill. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. So happy to be here with you.
Oh, it's great. We're talking about this concept, coming at it from different ways, but let's start with a reality check. Where do we stand today with test optional in college admissions?
So I would say test optional is still kind of the norm. Most colleges in the country are still test optional. That can mean different things depending on the school, depending on what you're trying to do as an applicant. How you navigate test optional is a different question. I'm sure we'll get into that shortly.
Yes.
There are some schools, however, in the country that are test-free. Namely, the University of California system doesn't use SAT or ACT scores at all. On the other end of the spectrum, there are some schools in the country that require SAT and ACT scores again. And there's been a little bit of movement back towards requiring tests, but the bulk of the schools in the country are still test optional.
Do you have advice about what should students do in this world? I mean, do they prepare for tests and take them and then play it out, or what do they do?
Yeah, I mean, as Bill mentioned, you've got a variety of schools doing a variety of different things, but the safest thing for a student to do is to assume that you're going to have one school that maybe requires the test. And if it's just one, you're better off taking the test and then navigating the landscape of your final, selection later. What we don't want is a student to make the decision that they don't need a score, get down deep into the admissions process, realize their favorite school in the world is the University of Florida. I have to take a test, and I didn't do that preparation process. So the safest way to go about it is to prepare to see where you can get your score to. Try to develop a good score, and then let the chips fall. They may relative to the schools that you're looking to apply to.
Yeah, and you're right. We are test prep guys,
Sure.
So we're in that world. So you might think we're biased, but at the same time, what we're really in the business of is helping students and helping support families. And we offer other stuff through Mindfish, like academic tutoring or executive function skills work or college essay support or whatever. So test prep might not be the right fit for everybody, and we're very honest with families about that. If testing doesn't need to be a priority, great. what should be the priority in your college admissions process.
Yeah, and, and if a student has their list just ironclad and they know every one of these schools is test free, I mean, no need to test. Right. Or if we have students all the time who come in with exceptional grades, and their scores are far below their grade level and they're all test optional, there are reasons to put your time and energy in other things, for sure.
What is this concept? I mean, this concept of test optional, how would you define it?
Yeah.
Good question.
We chuckle because it's complicated to answer.
Yeah.
It's a nuanced topic. On its surface, test optional is what it sounds like. Test optional colleges may or may not consider test scores, but students are not required to submit them. Students have the option of whether they choose to submit them or not. And it can really run the gamut. There are some test optional schools that really don't care that much about scores. Yeah. There are others that do. And in that test optional world, there's just a huge range of options. I can think of some examples offhand, like the Barrett School at University of Arizona. I've heard officials there say they may use test scores as a tiebreaker between students. And so, on the surface, you're like, oh, okay, they may use it as a tiebreaker, probably not that big of a deal. And then you're like, wait, they may use it as a tiebreaker. Like, that seems like a big deal.
Right.
So it could go either way.
Right.
Another school I think of, just kind of random school, Rollins College in Florida, is private school in Florida, is test optional. They really don't care about test scores unless you're applying to their business school as an undergrad, and then they're required. So there are all these weird little nuances. And so at the end of the day, it sort of makes your job as a college consultant a little more complicated, and it makes the student's life a little more complicated because it needs to be a school-by-school decision of whether you're submitting these scores or not. Because some schools really don't care and some schools do.
I think it's really important to think about not just the schools you're applying to, but those majors, like you said. I mean, just here in Colorado, University of Colorado, if you want to be in the honors program at the business school, you have to have a strong SAT score. You want to be in the honors program at the engineering school. So I think you don't just look at the schools now. You have to think about what you're majoring in and then do that deeper dive. And so there's a lot of moving parts here when we say optional. And in general, I would say the vast majority of schools that say test optional would prefer a good score. And we could talk about what a good score means. Obviously, that's a very subjective statement. But very few schools that are test optional, I think, are truly we don't care type schools. I think that's a little misleading.
I always advise students, take the test. It will help you if you have a score that kind of confirms your grades, your transcript, or elevates it.
Yes. And it's not necessarily a free option because you still have to pay to take this test. You have to put time into preparing for it. But to go out and get a good score sets you up to then have more options versus the other option, which is to not test and then run into a situation where you really need a score is a tough place to be.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
I'm a fan of cheesy metaphors, and my cheesy metaphor for this is, you've got a college toolbox, and in that toolbox you've got grades, extracurriculars, letters of recommendation, test scores, this kind of thing. And for me, having a test score in that toolbox is a good tool to have in case you need it. And what you do with that tool, whether you send it to schools, whether you choose not to, that's a different question. You'll figure that out down the line. But having the tool in your toolbox in case it's useful is a good option to have open.
For students who have a score, they're trying to decide whether to submit it or not. Do you have tips on or input on whether they should do that?
I tend to look at the interquartile range of a school, right?
Yeah.
So we're looking at that range and we're saying if your score's in that range, it's a positive, right? I mean, that's a simple way to go. But I think a little bit more nuanced perspective is to say, how does this score compare with my academic profile? And for a lot of students who maybe had a bad year, maybe their freshman year wasn't a great year, and you've got a score that's maybe not quite in the interquartile range, but it's right up against it. Yep. That's a way to kind of solidify you as a student and make the college understand that, you just had a bad freshman year. You've moved on. You're a good, strong student. So in general, we go student by student with this decision. But I think that the general reality is if it's in the interquartile range, it's a positive. If it's near the high end, I think it's a very high positive. But since COVID and the test optional world happened, scores started to get a little higher.
Yes.
And so I always tell kids, if you're butting up against that range, you're probably okay. So if the range is 31 to 34 and you have a 30, we probably say send. If the range is 27 to 30 and you have a 26, we're probably going to say send. But I mean, every student is different. I mean, we have a student with sparkling grades, perfect score, perfect grades, and that score isn't in that range and it's a couple clicks down. There might be a reason not to send that score in certain situations. But generally speaking, if you type a school and SAT or ACT, the score range you see is the interquartile range. So that's an easy way for students to do that.
Yeah, and I basically ask students, does your test score add value to your college application, right? If it makes you look better, that's a good thing. You probably want to send it. If it detracts from the rest of your application, like if you have really great grades and test scores that aren't quite at that level, maybe you think twice about sending.
Yeah. I like the you each hit another part of the consideration. One part is from the applicant's perspective, and the other part is from the school's perspective. And I've had admissions officers say, if you're in the lower quartile of test scores, don't send it because it's going to blow our curve.
Yes.
We want our scores to go up.
They want them to go up. They certainly do.
And that, you suggest a really good point here too, which is you can actually call the admissions department and say like, hey, I'm this student. Probably don't give me your name, but hey, I'm this student. Here's my GPA. Here's my test score. Do you think I should send it? Right? And they will tell you.
Give you an input. Yeah. I'm sure you've run into myths or beliefs that parents or students come in. Can you share any of the biggest myths or misunderstandings family have about testing and test optional and all the world?
Can I drop my number one myth?
Please.
My number one myth is that the SAT or ACT is somehow an intelligence test, right? Like people come into this like, oh, the SAT is an IQ test, or this measures how smart I am, or how successful I'm going to be in school or life or whatever. And I think that's a very widespread myth. I think it's really unhealthy.
Yeah.
The SAT and ACT are very specific tests. I often tell kids like the SAT measures how good you are at the SAT.
Yeah.
Right?
Love it.
Yeah, that's a good one. I think another good one is just that, I'm a bad test taker. And I think that's just something that, it's like anything. It just, the earlier you say that to yourself, the more you're going to reinforce it.
Yeah.
So a lot of our students come in and they say, oh, I'm just, I'm a bad test taker. And the reality is at somewhere in their educational development, they had a bad test and they kept reinforcing it. And the reality is, like Bill said, being good at the SAT is about being good at the SAT. So practicing it, developing familiarity, developing confidence, oftentimes you can become a good test taker. You may not end up acing the SAT, but that's not the goal. The goal is to maximize your potential to develop a score, like Bill said, that you put in your toolbox that can accelerate or enhance your profile.
Those are take it to the bank myths that are busted now. Thank you. So because you're experts, let me ask you to predict the future for us. So where do you see testing going? I mean, where will it be in a decade from now or whatever you want?
And because of AI and because of, I think, the inability for teachers to truly know whether their students are doing their own work, I don't think tests are going anywhere. I think, 3-4 years ago in COVID, there was a question of, will these things be there? They need a vehicle that is objective, that they know wasn't AI assisted. So I think, these tests aren't going anywhere. The ACT is probably a little bit more of in a precarious position because they're going through changes. We'll see if those changes are accepted by the market. More than likely, we'll have two tests. We always hope that one of them falls off and we can only focus on one. But more than likely, we'll have the two. And I do think that the importance of these tests is probably going to continue to rise slowly. Again, as I think schools struggle with understanding what is a grade meet anymore if the work is essentially mostly done by AI.
And another point I would add to that is I don't think we're going back to the old days when tests were required at most colleges. I think test optional is here to stay. I do agree with what you said, Ryan, that there may be a trickling back to more schools requiring tests, even more departments within universities requiring tests. But I think test optionals is probably going to be the way of the world going forward.
Well, fabulous. You guys are amazing. I love your wisdom. Thank you so much. Let me just ask you all, stick around. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by Bell College Consulting. Visit bellcollegeconsulting.com to learn more.
It's time now for a sort of summary of suggestions from today's episode. I call it Top Tips.
Top tips. Top tips. Kind of a summary, but we call it top tips. Top tips.
Here we go. Top tips for testing in a test optional world. Number 7, most colleges are test optional. Number 6, colleges may be more lenient than the specific majors within the college regarding test scores. Number 5, it's safest to take the test and decide later whether to send your scores. Number 4, submitting your test scores is often a school-by-school decision. Number 3, deciding whether to submit your scores involves the college's scores of admitted students, that middle 50% range. And even if your score is a little below that, if it's bumping up against the bottom side, maybe you should submit it. It also involves your academic profile. Does the score compare well with your academic profile, your transcript, those sorts of things? And put another way, does your test score add value to the application? Number 2, you can ask admissions offices if your score will help your application. And the number 1 tip for testing in a test optional world is that the test is not an IQ test. It is simply a measure of how good you are at the test. That's it. Thank you again to the guys from Mindfish for coming here and lending us their wisdom. And remember, college is awesome.